I'm trying to say in this cartoon is that violence is everywhere in our society. You know, it's like even in breakfast cereals, man.
Mr. Mash, imagine if you will. I'm a kid about 10 years old, and I'm looking at my parents' VHS shelf, and I see this movie on the shelf, Pulp Fiction. Oh, what's this about? 2.5 hours later, my mind has completely changed.
Okay, I can imagine this.
Before I saw that movie, I liked movies. I watched a bunch. I'd seen
who doesn't like movies?
Exactly. Everybody goes to the movies. But after I saw that movie, I became a film fanatic. I suddenly started making up a list of things I had to see. Long list. Lists that are still ongoing. That really is the birth of my film fandom. The films of Quentin Tarantino, that's a title drop, had that effect on a lot of people. He's the movie lover's filmmaker. Films are packed full of little shout-outs and references to older films. His movies are imbued with that energetic love of cinema.
Well, the thing I like about Tarantino is how he interweaves this astounding dialogue into his movies. You know me better than anybody, and you know that I absolutely hate movies that are 90% dialogue.
And his movies are all 90% dialogue.
And his movies are all 90% dialogue, but Quentin Tarantino is probably one of my favorite directors, if not my favorite director.
His movies are always an event for me.
And I've never seen one that I haven't liked. I've seen one that I've liked less than others.
I'm the same. There are those that I'm not crazy about. I do love the overwhelming majority of his movies. Hey, Ramblers, let's get rambling. Start.
Are you gonna bark all day, little doggy? Or are you gonna bite?
Larry, stop pointing that fucking gun at my dad!
Did you know that Reservoir Dogs was actually not Tarantino's very first movie?
No.
Before Reservoir Dogs, he shot an incomplete short film called My Best Friend's Birthday. You can find this online pretty easily. And even though it's incomplete, you still get a really clear idea of Tarantino's aesthetic. The movie's about a guy buys his best friend a call girl for his birthday. Upon meeting the guy and the call girl start talking about Nancy Allen's character in Dressed to Kill. Right there, who've got that Tarantino-esque dialogue about interweaving these references to other films. For all intents and purposes, 1992's Reservoir Dogs is indeed his very first movie. His very first feature service. Something I noticed rewatching this film. Do you remember the opening scene in Reservoir Dogs, where the guys are sitting around the table in the diner talking?
Vaguely, but yes.
They're not talking about the plot. And this is something that Tarantino has done over and over again in his movies. The characters are just talking about stuff.
I think that's one of the things that makes his dialogue so interesting. A lot of times, the dialogue just has very little to do with...
They're talking like real people.
Yeah. We wouldn't talk about the grand plot of the movie.
Yeah, but in a weird way, that opening scene does move the plot. It establishes each one of those characters and what they're about. Steve Buscemi's Mr. Pink very famously says he doesn't tip. Later, what's this character's entire motivation? He's the one at the end of the film who grabs the diamonds and runs away. The selfish character motivated more by his own safety than anybody else. So he doesn't care about anybody else. So of course he doesn't tip. Mr. Orange is sitting and observing and listening. Mr. Brown, Tarantino's character, rambles about unimportant bullshit because he's not an important character at all. Harvey Keitel's Mr. White is actually the mediator between everybody, keeping the peace. And also, of note, he shows compassion for the waitress. He says waitresses are on their feet all day. They don't make any money. You should tip. Later on, he's the one who throughout most of the film is taking care of Mr. Orange, who has, in a subtle way, he does establish who these characters are and what they do. And something Mr. Tarantino has been accused of throughout his career is glorifying violence. What do you think about that? Do you think his movies are glorifying violence, Mr.?
No, I think they're necessarily violent. For the subject matter in which they're referring to, that he doesn't overdo the violence, with the exception of Kill Bill Volume 1. That was an art thing. He doesn't glorify the violence. These guys are in this line of work.
Yeah.
This is what they deal with.
Not only does he not glorify violence, I think there's actually a tone of anti-violence. What's the opening credits? The thieves are strolling along to little greenbacks, and they're in their black suits and their sunglasses, and they look really, really cool. But the next scene right after the opening credits, Mr. Orange in the backseat of the car, bleeding to death, dying, screaming in agony. Oh, they're not so cool now, are they? The prevailing theme in the film is that there's no honor among thieves. Everybody's out for themselves. The one person in the group who does have honor, Mr. White, winds up paying for that because he's the one who decides he's going to protect Mr. Orange when he's accused of being the rat. And this ends up not ending well for him. So the moral lesson of Reservoir Dogs, and I do believe this is a moral movie, lesson is crime doesn't pay, kids. Do you think I'm just seeing shit that isn't there, or do you think
I see a lot of what you're talking about. It resonates through a lot of his movies where...
Yeah, and I do believe there is actually something of a moral certitude to the director's films that are sometimes overlooked by his theatrical violence. But getting back to Reservoir Dogs, in later films, the director would blatantly chapter his sequences. He would say, chapter 1, etc. This movie doesn't have that, but it still has that structure. Introductory scene that sets the tone, not necessarily the plot. We cut to the warehouse. And notably, the majority of this film are people standing around and talking in a warehouse. We'll have a short scene there, and then we'll cut back, and we'll get a little bit of the character's background. We learned that Mr. White used to hang out with Alabama, the hooker from True Romance, which Tarantino wrote, didn't direct. And we learn about Mr. Blonde just got out of prison. The most extensive background is when we go into Mr. Orange's past and find out about him. There's that very, very meta moment where he is trying to convince the other guys of this story, going to the bathroom with the pot in his pockets, and there are all these cops in the bathroom waiting for him. That's a weird moment. He's telling the characters in the film, trying to convince them that this actually happened, even though it didn't. We earlier see him rehearsing it, almost as if he's an actor, which he is in a weird way. Strange double moment where we're aware that we're watching an actor in a movie, and the actor in the movie is also playing an actor, and there's these meta layers to it.
Meta.
And after each flashback, we return to the situation in the warehouse. Even though the film does not blatantly call it the novel structure like the director's later films would, it's still there. What do you think of the use of music in Reservoir Dogs? Something Tarantino is also very well known for is his soundtracks.
Honestly, it's been a while since I've seen the movie, and I can't remember much about the music.
You do remember Stuck in the Middle of You, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people think the director just pulls these songs out because he likes them, because he thinks they're cool. The music comment on what's happening as Mr. Blonde is torturing a cop, because he famously says, I like to torture cops.
Cuts off the ear.
People remember that seeming a lot more violent than it actually is. You don't see him cut the ear off. The camera pans away to a wall. If you listen to the song Stuck in the Middle with You, what are some of the words? Please.
Yeah.
It's almost as if the song is ironically commenting on the victim's pain.
That's something he does a lot with the music in his movies. It's almost a contrast to what's going on.
Especially at the end of this one. This movie ends in a bloodbath. All the named characters are dead.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. It's a 20-year-old movie. The song that plays over the end credits is Harry Nelson's Coconut. And you put the lime in the coconut and call me in the morning. That's a sick joke because there's nothing a doctor can do to make these people feel better. Something else Tarantino is noted for, sometimes criticized for, is not only the references to older films, but he frequently pulls the actual concepts from later films. There is a persistent theory that Reservoir Dogs is an uncredited remake of a Hong Kong film called City on Fire. Now, I haven't seen City on Fire, so I cannot comment on this. But supposedly, Reservoir Dogs is almost a shot-for-shot remake of it. I feel like a lot of people are a little too willing to say the Emperor has no clothes on. This fresh young talent was actually stealing everything, but there is some deliberate references. The code names are from the original Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3. The thieves in that have Pelham-based code names. The scene where the cop gets his ear cut off, that's from the original Django. Tim Roth looks into the mirror and says something, which is at a taxi driver. Mr. Blonde pulling the straight razor out of his boot, that's out of a movie called Cruising. There are deliberate references in the film. Some people say Tarantino is the world's most famous plagiarist. I personally feel like it's more akin to what a DJ does when he mixes together a bunch of old songs. He's not ripping something off, he's putting it together in something new and refreshing and energizing.
The thing with that, but he has a very distinct style that transfers over into 90% of his films. Even in films that he just writes and doesn't direct.
Have you seen True Romance, by the way?
No.
I keep telling you to watch True Romance because even though Tony Scott directed that film, it is so clearly a Tarantino film.
From Dusk Till Dawn.
Definitely. What do you think of the performances in Reservoir Dogs, from what you can remember?
I remember Harvey Keitel, Mr. White, being my favorite of the characters. He's so level-headed.
It gets less level-headed as the movie goes
yeah, but
on.
I mean, even when he's at his most frustrated, he's still got this level of calm to him.
You know what he is? He's a Ronin. He is an honorable samurai warrior without a master. That's the character type. He's the only thief that has honor. Ends up not working out for him.
If it wouldn't be him, it'd be Mr. Blonde. I don't know, they're the two most famous people.
Certainly the film that made Michael Madsen, I guess, a star. As much of a star as he's ever been.
Star in the sense that if it wasn't for Tarantino, he wouldn't have a career.
I don't want to comment on Mr. Madsen's personal life, mainly because I'm afraid if I say something, he will show up and beat me up. You do get the impression that maybe he hasn't made the best career decisions. Every 10 years, Tarantino writes a new movie for him. He has some clout again, and then he'll go and do a bunch of Uwe Boll movies. Mr. Blonde is a sociopath. Steve Buscemi is perfect.
Yeah.
He rolls with that dialogue so succinctly, and that character is so perfect for him. I really can't imagine anybody else in the part. And it surprises me that Tarantino hasn't worked with Buscemi again, aside from he has a cameo in Pulp Fiction. That's it.
Maybe he'll be in Kill Bill Volume 3, which we'll never get.
Yeah, obviously I saw Pulp Fiction first, and then I went back later and saw Reservoir Dogs. I never really liked the movie as much. I would still say it's not one of my favorite Tarantino films, but rewatching it again this past month, I actually did like it a lot. Returning to this film, I did actually find myself liking it a little more than I had remembered.
It's really entertaining.
Now, right now I'm a fucking race car, right? And you got me in a red. And I'm just saying that it's fucking dangerous to have a race car in a fucking red. That's all. I could blow.
Oh, you ready to blow?
Yeah, I'm ready to blow.
Well, I'm a mushroom cloud laying motherfucker. Every time my fingers touch brain, I'm Superfly TNT. I'm the guns of the Navarone. In fact, what the fuck am I doing in the back? You the motherfucker should be on brain detail. We fucking switching. I'm washing the windows and you picking up this nigga's skull.
The film that really did turn me into a Tarantino fanboy is Pulp Fiction. To this day, is still my favorite movie. It's way up there.
Well, we know what my favorite is.
Irresistible energy to the movie. Opening credits have that Dick Dale Marcelou song over it, that surf rock energy to it, and the whole film carries on that energy. The whole film is just electrifying watching it.
Now, this movie is the starting point of Tarantino's, dare I say, ironic use of the word nigger.
Are we allowed to say that word? Oh no, do we have in-bomb privileges?
The reason I said it was because I wasn't saying it towards anybody.
We love black people.
Like, that's the word that he uses.
He did use the word in Reservoir Dogs briefly. The one scene in the movie I actually do not like in that film, when Nice Guy Eddie and Mr. Blonde are talking about his years in prison.
Well, that's just offensive.
It does get used literally in this film, and would continue to be used, and to the point where Spike Lee famously said, I'm not offended by the word, but I don't understand why he's so obsessed with it. Does he want to be an honorary black man or something?
Yes.
Him and Spike Lee kind of have a history. The big difference for me between Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs, in Pulp Fiction, you want to spend time with these characters. The characters in Reservoir Dogs were ultimately not very likable. Even though these characters are in the same world, they're criminals and drug addicts and hitmen.
And isn't this a loose sequel?
Vincent Vega is Mr. Blonde's brother, and all his films take place in the same universe. This movie introduces Big Kahuna Burger, teriyaki donuts, and red apple cigarettes continue to show up throughout all of his films. They're not really sequels per se. What did the hitman talk about on the way to the hit? Talking about Amsterdam and the differences between America and Europe. These characters are human beings. They have inner lives. They have opinions and thoughts about esoteric things. That's just what I love so much about this film. The characters are just so great and memorable.
My favorite scene in this movie. The scene where John Travolta and Samuel Jackson are having a dispute. John Travolta turns around and looks at the guy in the back seat and starts to talk.
I don't even have an opinion.
What's your opinion? Actually pulls the trigger as he's talking.
Well, there's a debate about did he pull the trigger, did the car go over a bump? Jules' reaction is, I didn't go over no motherfucking bump!
Hilarious to me.
Oh, that third segment, the Bonnie situation, is hilarious. Every time my fingers touch brains, I am Superfly TNT. I am the guns of the Navarone. I am a mushroom cloud laying motherfucker. But each one of these sequences are great, but that last one in particular is probably my favorite.
Yeah, where Uma Thurman has the overdose.
The wonderful thing about that sequence, the first time you watch it, it's actually rather thrilling. It gets very hectic and nervous, but the second time, really, really funny. Bring the needle down. Do I stab her 3 times? After he puts the adrenaline in her chest, and she screams, and the wife says, that was trippy. I would not call this movie a comedy. It definitely does have a very strong element of humor to it.
All of his movies have a very strong element of, even in the most serious of times in his films, there's still an element of comedy there.
There's a perverse comedic undertone that undermines the harshness of the violence.
Yes.
It continues a lot of the thoughts that were in Reservoir Dogs about how the crooks look cool, but they're not really cool. Go through some pretty unglamorous situations. Vince and Jules get brain matter splatter all over their heads and then are in the dorky volleyball shirts at the end. Marcellus Wallace may look like a cool gangsta. Some of the things that happens to him throughout the course of this film certainly deflates his macho bravado, I think. Mia ODs, and the movie was criticized at the time for glorifying drug use, and I really don't know how anybody could say that when you have Uma Thurman passed out with the blood coming out of her nose and the white foam coming out of her mouth. I don't think anybody saw this movie and said, I'm gonna go do heroin now.
He shows you what happens when you overdose.
But it's not preachy either. You know what this movie's actually about, though? I noticed this while watching it.
Reaganomics.
No.
Was that close?
Not at all. It is about fate, man. Think about the little coincidences.
Oh, yeah.
Why would Marcellus Wallace, the one person Butch should not be seeing, step out of that donut shop just as he's driving across that road at that point in time? Why would the pawn shop they stumble into be home to these redneck, deviant rapists? Why do Vince and Jules just happen to be at the diner where the robbery is taking place?
What's the line from that scene? Fella said, bitch be cool.
Bitch be cool!
Say, bitch be cool!
We're all gonna be a bunch of little Fonzies, and what's Fonzie? Cool? Correctamundo! Point the gun at me, honey bunny! But the most obvious example of that theme of fate is at the end when the guy steps out of the bathroom, unloads this giant gun on Vince and Jules, and they don't get shot. That sets up Jules' change of heart, the miracle that happens. Why didn't the gun go off? Why were all the bullets blanks?
I don't know.
It's fate, man. God got involved. Help me
Yeah,
find my
but
car
Vega
keys.
dies. He gets killed by Bruce Willis.
Maybe because he didn't believe. The film is also about change and how people can change for the better. That happens. Jules says, I'm done with the life. I'm going to walk the earth like Caine in Kung Fu.
Jules quotes Ezekiel before killing a motherfucker. Okay, the movie's version of his.
Yeah, because that monologue is actually from an old Sonny Chiba movie.
Whatever. That is some cold ass shit.
Well, he says in the film, I just thought it was some cold shit to say to a motherfucker.
And it
Busting
is.
a cap in his ass. It is. And you will know my name is the Lord when I lay my vengeance upon thee.
They couldn't have picked a better person to say that line than Samuel L. fucking Jackson.
Sam Jackson phones it in so much these days. In this movie, he is incredible. He actually gives a really good performance.
I don't think he phoned it in on the Avengers.
Yeah, a little bit. He's very funny when he needs to be. When he's doing the monologue, his eyes are just huge. He's so intense. He's really into it. At the end of the film, where he talks to Tim Roth's character, I find that moment so affecting. And it's the world that's cruel and evil. And Mr. 45 here is the shepherding my ass through the valley of darkness. But that shit ain't true. I'm the tyranny of evil men, and you're the weak. But I'm trying to be the shepherd. You can tell it has effect on me because I have the entire thing memorized.
Great dialogue in this movie.
Absolute. Now, obviously, the movie's called Pulp Fiction. The reason it plays out like a short story collection is intentional. Duh, it's as if you're reading a collection of short stories. Each of the segments do have a different tone. Vince Vega and Mr. Marcellus' wife starts out as this charming romantic comedy because Travolta and Thurman have such incredible chemistry together. By the way, John Travolta, who knew he was a good actor? What the hell? John Travolta's a good actor. And then I'll see, look who's talking for, and it's like, oh. Talk about a person whose career's had ups and downs.
I guess it's safe to say that Pulp Fiction was the one that he wanted.
Travolta has two really high peaks, Saturday Night Fever, which is a good film, and then Grease, which I guess is a good movie. A 10-year period of just the worst shit imaginable. And then Pulp Fiction, and then immediately after that... And now he's famous for asking for a handy in a massage parlor. Good in this film. He's really good in this film.
If there would have been a Batman 5.
John Travolta as the Scarecrow, can you imagine?
He was on his way to being Bat-villain material.
Oh, God. But then the second sequence in the film, the Gold Watch. Pretty memorable moments in that. That's the movie at its most bizarre. Why did they have a GIMP? What is the GIMP's purpose? Some strange things went on in that basement. Christopher Walken. Nobody could deliver that monologue. It had the unique effect that it has when Christopher Walken's doing it.
This Christopher Walken's awesome.
He'd be damned if Yellow Gook got his hands on what he considered to be his son's birthright. So he hid it in the only place he knew where, up his ass. And when his father died of dysentery, I hid this uncomfortable hunk of metal up my ass for 7 years. And now, Butch, this to you. And again, Bruce Willis, actually a good actor.
Yeah.
Somebody else who phones it in. Did you see Red 2? He looks so bored in that. He looks like he's fucking asleep. Not only is Bruce Willis great in this, but I can see where he was a major sex symbol. The scene with Fabian, little dialogue there, it's actually sweet and romantic. He has this tough guy exterior, but he has this romantic interior. It's really appealing. We've already talked about the Bonnie situation, how much we love that sequence.
Yes.
Harvey Keitel's Mr. Wolf is the only quote-unquote cool character in the film who does not have that coolness undermined in any way and maintains that level of slickness. Was Uma Thurman ever hotter? She's really attractive in this movie.
The man hands, man. I can't get past the man.
I didn't notice her man hands.
Well, that's because they're hid well in Pulp Fiction, but man, we won't talk about it yet. I will wait until Kill Bill Volume 2 before I talk about Uma Thurman.
You're not going to talk about her in Kill Bill Volume 1?
Well, you know what I mean.
Obviously, I love Pulp Fiction. It's a film that means a lot to me. Rewatching it this previous time, the only thing that doesn't work in the movie is the Jack Rabbit Slim sequence. When I first saw the film as a teenager, I thought, wow, that's really cool. I want to go to a retro 50s rockabilly restaurant where the waiters are dressed as celebrities. But looking at it now, that shit is corny. That hasn't aged well. The rest of the movie is perfect.
You never got into the whole CD revolution?
Oh, I got a few, but I can't afford to start all over again. I mean, I've invested too much time and money in my albums.
Yeah, but you can't get new stuff on records.
I don't get new stuff that often.
Now you gotta listen to this, man, because this concerns you, all right?
Pulp Fiction was an enormous hit. Made Tarantino's name as a filmmaker. Suddenly he was the auteur of the 90s. For his next film, 1997, Jackie Brown, this is an interesting case because this is the only one of his movies that's adapted. This is adapted from an Elmore Leonard novel called Rum Punch. And it's also the first of his films to star a woman. There were no female characters in Reservoir Dogs at all. And the female characters in Pulp Fiction were supporting characters for the most part. It stars a woman and it's about a woman. And who is that woman?
Jackie Brown.
Played by
Pam Grier.
Pam Grier.
I couldn't spit it out at the time. That's why I went with Jackie Brown.
What are your thoughts on this film? Because it's overlooked in Tarantino's career.
This is probably one of my least favorite ones. I like it. I do.
It's a very slow film.
It does have some funny scenes in it. Some very Tarantino funny scenes, I guess I should say. What's that I feel up against my dick? What do you think it is, sucker? I think it's a gun pressed up against my dick. Well, then you'd be right.
After I rewatched the film, I looked at the trailer. Gunshot sound effects in it and it cut quickly and like, oh, this is a big crime movie. But it really isn't that at all. It is a very relaxed character study. And I enjoyed the film a lot, actually. It is almost entirely people sitting around and talking.
Like I said, it does have some good scenes in it.
And the scene you mentioned where Ordell, Samuel Jackson's character, confronts Jackie, and we already know at this point that Ordell's a killer. He's already killed Chris Tucker. But we know what he's capable of. So when he visits Jackie in the middle of the night and turns turns the lights off. What's so refreshing about that scene is she so succinctly turns the tables on him, which is great because first off, it's Pam Grier doing her thing.
Yeah.
We've talked a little bit about our appreciation for Miss Grier before, and I want to do a 70s blaxploitation episode someday so we can talk about Coffee, Foxy Brown, and movies like that.
And Friday Foster.
And Sheba Baby. I do enjoy those films a lot. It's a shame that her career did not take off after this. She was basically a character actress at this point, was in things like Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, Something Wicked This Way Comes. She was around. She was a leading lady, a big star in the 70s, and then as soon as the 70s were over, she was relegated to supporting role. She's really, really good in this movie. It's such a powerful performance. The final scene, driving away in the car, and she looks like she's just about to cry. What this movie is about, a woman who's lived her entire life under the thumb of various men. And as the movie opens, we see that the drug and firearm agents, Michael Keaton and the other guy, are bossing her around. She obviously is being manipulated by Ordell. And the movie's about her turning the tables on the men in her life. Such a strong role for Pam. I am amazed that she was not nominated for an Oscar for this. It blows my mind. Another thing that I like about this movie is the relationship between Jackie and Max Cherry, Robert Forster's character. They have this romance, but it's not a movie romance. It's not defined by these melodramatic gestures. It's very quiet. They sit and talk, and they obviously like each other a lot. It's very realistic in a weird way. I really enjoy that. The movie's very slow paced up until that last act, when we have the scene in the mall, which is shown to us 3 different times from 3 different perspectives. That's the only very Tarantino move. The film does not have the non-linear storytelling he's so famous for. The movie is pretty straightforward up until that segment. Pretty awesome.
I think you hit on it a little bit. The reason that this movie was not as well received as some of the other ones is because it was misrepresented.
People were expecting another Pulp Fiction, and it's not.
Poster had
Guns and bags of money,
and the trailer did that. That's what hurt it the most, was its advertising.
I agree. One of my favorite things the movie does is Robert De Niro's character. He's laconic. I don't want to make it sound like a lazy performance. It's so completely against type.
Yeah.
He's not a stoner. It sort of acts like he's a stoner. It's actually a really great performance. Completely unexpected.
And he gets to have sex with
Bridget Fonda at her peacockness. Bridget Fonda, who spends the whole movie lounging around in short shorts and a bikini top, barefooted, of course, because it's a Tarantino movie. We haven't talked about the foot fetish yet, but we will.
Just when you said that, I knew what scene you were talking about that we were going to talk about.
It is overlooked in his career, but it is a good film. I feel like Jackie Brown is a quality film.
Do you find me sadistic? I'd like to believe you're aware enough, even now, to know that there's nothing sadistic in my actions. No, kiddo. At this moment, this is me at my most masochistic.
Bill, it's your baby.
After that, he took a 6-year break, which is surprising. He was working pretty consistently throughout the 90s. After 6 years of no Tarantino movies at all, he came back in 2003 with Kill Bill. I remember the advertisements. This October, Uma Thurman is going to kill Bill.
Which is like the most awesome tagline ever.
It was also very misleading because she didn't actually kill Bill until next April.
Well,
but
it's a 2-volume movie. One movie, it's just split into 2 volumes.
From my understanding, you're a big fan of Kill Bill.
I love Kill Bill. Who am I when a kid? I just love Kill Bill.
Oh, it's good.
It's probably my favorite.
This is probably my second favorite. After Pulp Fiction, this was Tarantino's first action movie. Because he really hadn't done an action movie before.
Yeah.
There were shooting and there was violence, but it was never on this scale where you have Uma Thurman decimating
60-some people. The only time he may have glorified gore was in the first half of this movie.
Actually, even then, I can bullshit it. The theme in this film, for me, is the difference between senseless violence and violence that has a good reason. What's the plot of Kill Bill? The bride,
betrayed, beaten up, shot in the head, put in a coma, lost her baby, so she thinks. Spoiler alert.
She's awake now and she's hella pissed.
Hella pissed. You know what's really sad? This movie's 11 years old now.
I know! I feel so fucking old! I can remember seeing this fucking thing in the theater. Oh, that was 11 years ago! The bride, Uma Thurman's character, has a reason to be angry. Her violence is motivated by a noble cause, as opposed to the unreasonable violence that was inflicted on her. Even then, she doesn't get out of the scene. What's one of the first things that happens in this film? She kills Vernita Green in front of her daughter. It's about the wages of revenge and the price of violence. I feel like it does carry on his theme, even though the action is very over the top.
Maybe he does it ironically.
I don't think the violence is ironic. I think the violence is in there because he watched 70s kung fu movies and Japanese yakuza movies, and in those movies you have people getting their heads lopped off and a geyser of gore erupting. He saw that in that movie and he said, that's cool, so he did it in this. The critics of Tarantino say this is the start of his self-indulgent period. There's there's maybe something to that, because what is Kill Bill? It is a remix of Grindhouse cinema. It's a kung fu movie, it's a Yakuza movie, it's a western. It is a cinematic collage. You can point out some clear homages and references. The plot owes a lot to a Japanese film called Lady Snowblood. It owes a lot to a French film called The Bride Wore Black.
The Crazy 88 dressed like Kato.
Kato from Green Hornet. They say that in the film. The bride wears Bruce Lee's yellow jumpsuit from Game of Death. Daryl Hannah's character, based off a Swedish film called Thriller, A Cruel Picture. I do not know the actress's name. I'm going to mispronounce it. You have Chiaki Kuriyama playing a very similar role to what she played in Battle Royale. When I first saw the movie, I actually recognized this when the orderly says to the bride's comatose body, "My name's Buck, and I'm here to fuck." That's from a Tobe Hooper movie called Eaten Alive. And you know who originally said those lines?
Dennis Hopper.
Robert Englund.
Damn.
I don't mind that. This movie captures the energy of that period of filmmaking. One of the things that drives it.
The reason I like this movie, because it's so funny.
Really?
I find this movie hilarious. Just the one-liners and...
In what way?
There's the one part where she lays on the floor and spins around and like cuts off the feet. And
the breakdancing?
And the one guy gets knocked out from the bamboo stick. And
Johnny Moe. Just go back home to your mother. This is what you get for fucking with Yakuza.
It's just...
The pussy wagon.
You know, the pussy wagon. I mean, it's just...
I guess it is a pretty funny movie.
It really is.
I don't really consider it a comedy. Obviously, the violence is exaggerated. I mean, Lucy Liu running across the table cuts the guy's head off, and it's like a solid minute of blood gushing, and always in a politeful way, question my judgment.
Let's say this in English so you motherfuckers know that I'm serious.
The House of Blue Leaves sequence is pretty incredible. Yeah. Because it's long. It's like a 40-minute sequence. It's pure ownage, as the kids on the internet say.
Yeah. Starts off with Sophie getting her arm cut off.
What are your thoughts on Gogo Yabari as a character?
I like her.
Would you have sex with her?
Probably.
Even knowing she's crazy and would probably stab
yeah,
you
but I mean, like,
It's a schoolgirl thing.
Yeah, well. Anyhow, what's really cool about her character is it's kind of like a live-action anime girl character.
So much.
She even does the laugh.
A little laugh where she covers her mouth, and then she picks up the ball and chain. And
yeah.
You talked about when she's breakdancing and cutting everybody's legs off, and she's running up banisters, leaping around and swinging on the giant bamboo.
And you mentioned the spanking with
the katana.
mentioned the
spanking, and she cuts a man in twain, yanks the eyeball out, and all of that stuff.
And another funny scene, it was dramatic, but to me it was a little bit humorous. Sonny Chiba would not make her a sword, and then she mentions Bill.
You must have very big vermin.
It's so dramatic, it's funny.
Sonny Chiba is the original badass for me. And he's great in this movie. Great performance. Obviously, we love the House of Blue Leaves fight, and that's a very stylized moment where it changes from black to white.
Yeah.
At one point, the characters are silhouette against a red screen. The music is very deliberate in that scene, the white lightning score. And
I really like the blue, where they black out.
Every time somebody gets their head, arm, leg cut off, there's that comical spray of blood. The first time you see that ridiculous blood spray is during the anime sequence. It gets the viewer used to the exaggerated reality of the film. When the bride gets shot at the beginning of the movie, that blood isn't comical. Mm-hmm. Slowly easing the audience into the exaggerated world of Kill Bill. Because unlike Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs, this doesn't take place in the real world. This is reality plus one.
Reality plus.
The scene where she kills the Crazy Eight is so incredible that, honestly, the first time I saw the movie, the duel between the bride and No-Ren Ishii was kind of disappointing. Works better on double viewing, but the first time, it just seems smaller compared to the huge fight scene where she decimates a whole army of people.
Like the fight scene, but I've always been kind of disappointed in the Vernita Green death.
That scene's awesome. That's a very different fight scene because it's very personal and it's very rough. Smash through the glass table and having shelves drop.
Well, and there's no music playing.
Yeah, it's very stark.
Like I said, I like the fight scene itself.
What's the name of the cereal? Kaboom?
Yeah, I think is what it was. After going through all that to get shafted with a throwing knife. Oh. Made a shotgun out of cereal. And...
You know you don't have to qualify that shit, bitch. A recurring theme, it seems like he gets really good performances out of people that normally you would not know. Oh, Vivica A. Fox, who the fuck is she? She's great in her brief part. It's a small part, but it's very memorable.
One thing I like about that scene, one of my favorite lines is when she's sitting there, on behalf of my daughter, and Uma Thurman goes, bitch, stop right there.
Well, that dialogue there is very exaggerated. The non-linear structure really becomes very noticeable. First of all, the movie, it's like chapter 1, 2. Okay, what's going on? That scene at the beginning of the movie actually takes place after the rest of the film.
Yeah.
And what do you think of Uma Thurman as an action star?
Worked out really well in this movie,
Yeah, she hasn't really done it effectively in any other film,
no.
but she's good in this one.
Yeah.
She's another actress. When it isn't Tarantino directing, you have to look at her career and wonder, what the fuck are you doing? Did you see that Motherhood movie she did?
No.
Oh my god, it was terrible. What are you doing, Uma?
I didn't see it.
You're not missing much.
You know why I think that these actors and actresses do so much better under Tarantino's direction than they do other others?
What's that?
It's because Tarantino lets them portray themselves almost. Exaggerated versions of themselves, I guess I should say. It's one of two things. He either lets them be themselves, or he keeps his pimp hand strong and just smacks them around, gives them direction out the ass. It's one of the two, but I really feel like it's the other one.
When you first saw this film, did the cliffhanger ending bother you?
No.
It doesn't bother me. You think it would. I've been very critical of The Hobbit and things like that stretch the story out. When it was first announced that Tarantino's next film would be split in two, I was pissed. Like, oh man, I'm going to have to wait another year to see the rest of the movie. The split actually ends up working for the film.
There are two different art styles for each half of the film.
Kill Bill Volume 2, which was released the next year, is a very different movie than the first one. It has a very different tone. And it's also notable that if the two halves had been together, it would have been a 4-hour-long movie, which is a trifle excessive.
Just a trifle.
It's a little long.
I went on what the movie advertisements refer to as a roaring rampage of revenge. I roared, and I rampaged, and I got bloody satisfaction. And when I arrive at my destination, I am gonna kill Bill.
Volume 2 has a different theme to it. We find out, at the end of the first one, we find out that the bride's daughter is indeed still alive. And suddenly the film becomes a weird movie about a mother's right to protect her daughter.
Well, I would say it's more along the lines of family. Bill goes to Bud, tries to warn him that she's coming, and even when Elle Driver kills Bud, she calls Bill.
Bill has all these women at his disposal. The impression seems to be that he's carried on a romantic relationship with all of them at some point in the past. He says, I'm the man. We find out why he put a bullet in the bride's head. Can we say her name now? Can we say Beatrice Kiddo?
Spoiler alert.
That's actually a cute joke because earlier in the film, Bill was calling her Kiddo, and then we find out, oh, that's actually your name. But we find out the reason he went after her is because she left him. It's really not much more complicated than that. She walked out of his life without telling him. The movie becomes about a woman struggling against a bruised male ego. More about the bride's inner life and what her motivations are as a character.
I think that the single biggest regret the bride is going to have is killing Bill. That scene at the end of the movie where BB's watching cartoons.
I interpret that scene completely differently. I think she's crying because she's happy. She's overjoyed.
She does laugh. I feel like she puts so much energy into hating him and fighting him.
And that's enough when we finally meet Bill. He's a really likable guy.
That's what I'm saying. But after she finally kills him, she gets to take in that breath.
Even when she does it, there's a tinge of regret to it.
Yeah.
She says, you must hate me. And he says, oh, you're a wonderful person. You're my favorite person. But it does follow the same, but sometimes you can be a real cunt.
She's happy that the ordeal's over, but she's also sad that probably the one true love that she's ever had in her life.
It's true. No, that's definitely in the film. After she puts BB to bed and she walks off to meet Bill to that wonderful song, there is that melancholy tone to her decision. She's very conflicted about it.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of the heart and soul of the movie.
It took me the longest time, but I finally had an epiphany why the kid was called BB.
Hi, is the kid called BB?
Beatrix and Bill.
That's very cute. I never noticed that before. I always thought BB gun. I don't know. Maybe it's something he stole from some old Hong Kong movie.
Beatrix and Bill.
Oh, that is very interesting. I think
isn't it just B period, B period?
Yeah, it's not BB like Deadly Friend BB. The letter B, the letter B. You might be onto something there, buddy. Even though the movie is more character-oriented, the opening chapter is almost too slow. But the performance is really elevated. And then, of course, it ends on that big punctuation mark. The Deadly Viper Assassination Squad. The Divas.
No, Bill!
Come in and kill everybody, yeah. But it is still an action movie. This film has maybe the greatest catfight ever put in celluloid. Elle Driver is an interesting character. You get the impression that her and Beatrix, they have this rivalry. They're both rivals for Bill's affection. And they're also rivals, I don't know if professionally is the right word. These are the two most deadly women in the world. When you finally get to see them face off, wonderful sequence where she's killed Bud and she opens the trailer door and then you have that tracking shot on Uma's feet, drop kicks her. They tear that trailer apart. They destroy it.
Beat each other with the TV antennas.
She pulls the TV, she picks up the guitar and smashes it and it's the fucking El Kabong sound effect.
That is one of the greatest scenes in that movie. And then when they finally lock swords and it plays that music.
Building and then bam!
And then she just plucks the eye out.
Plucks the eye out.
And Elle's like, you bitch! You bitch!
Goes crazy. When I saw it in the theater, when that happened, I remember very distinctly somebody in the audience yelled, oh shit!
She killed that bitch!
We don't know if Elle's dead.
I like to think that because they left the Black Mamba in the trailer, and without her having eyes,
I believe that is suggestion, but then again, it's just open enough. She might be back if Tarantino ever gets around to making Volume 3. Think about Bud.
He's kind of ineffective.
He seems to be. He really has this incredibly pathetic life.
But he's the only one to actually one-up the bride.
He comes very, very close to killing her. In return, somewhat ironically, he's the only one that the bride does not kill.
Ain't nobody badass with rock-solid crown deep down in her tits.
Yeah. Tarantino's dialogue sounds very, very natural coming out of his mouth. But even then, I get that we're supposed to see how pathetic his life is. He's this bouncer in the strip club, and he's living in this really shitty trailer, and his existence is terrible. I feel like if the movie had been one film instead of two, a lot of that would have been cut out. Let's go on a bit.
The movie needed to be as long as it was.
There's very little that could have been cut. The scene where she's buried alive, that's very tense. That's Tarantino's Lucio Fulci movement. And if you've seen any Lucio Fulci movies, you recognize that so clearly. Focus on the eyes is very much a Fulci sequence. What do you think of Pai Mei?
I love Pai Mei.
What's Bill's line?
He hates Caucasians.
He hates Caucasian. He
despises Americans
and he has nothing but contempt for women. You'll do fine. It's an 80s training montage.
Yeah.
Done in a way that's not ridiculous. She's sleeping, and in her sleep, she punches the wall, and then love that. You want to eat your food like a dog, you'll eat on the floor like a dog. And reveal about, I poisoned that old fool's fish heads.
Miserable old fool's fish heads. Damn, cold-hearted bitch.
It's notable that the only way Elle could beat Pai Mei is by cheating.
I've always taken that scene as what actually sets up the feud between the bride and Elle. Bill always has this disappointment in Elle Driver. She wasn't the great student.
This is an action movie that climaxes not with a sword fight, but with a conversation.
Like, the fuck did you shoot me with? And we all know that I argue with the Superman mentality.
Yeah, we personally don't agree with that, but it is a great moment. Who knew David Carradine was this good of an actor? I've seen a lot of David Carradine movies, and he's never acted this well before.
It's his dialogue. It must be so natural.
The Kill Bill duology, it's not really a duology. It's not a sequel. It's one movie that got cut in two. It is an immensely satisfying film. I really love these two movies.
We could talk all day about these movies.
We really could. At one point, the director said he wanted to do a sequel. He wanted to do Volume 3.
It would depend on how it's handled.
At one point, I would have been interested in seeing that. It would have been about Renee's daughter getting revenge on the bride. The suggestion would have been that the bride would have died, and then Bibi would have gone on her own roaring rampage of revenge. Though I'm sure
the movie would never end.
I don't really want to see a third one. The bride has earned her peace. But you know what I would watch? I would watch the fuck out of a prequel. And I know prequels are very maligned. There's so much more to this world that we could explore. Why does Bill attract these powerful women to him that would be willing to drive a motorcycle onto a moving train for him? Why was the bride so good at killing even before she was trained by Pai Mei? Where did Bill find her? What's the relationship between Bill and Elle? I would watch a movie just about the divas doing their thing. That would be a film worth seeing, I think.
Well, I had suggested that to you. Like, do like a Charlie's Angels-ass movie.
Very disappointed now that we can't see that. David Carradine is dead, and you couldn't recast the part without it being really distracting. Though it is notable, you know who was originally going to be Bill, and I think might have even filmed some scenes?
Yeah.
Warren Beatty. Warren Beatty? You don't know who Warren Beatty is. Never mind.
I recognize the name. I just can't put the...
Yeah, Dick Tracy.
Okay.
And one question I do have. Was Bill the guy with the sword who killed Oren's dad? Was that Bill? In the animated sequence, it's that tracking shot up the sword where he has the rings on. That mirrors the earlier scene where he's on the phone with Elle.
Maybe.
Maybe? I always felt like that was implied. Point is, there's still a lot of unanswered questions. I would really love to see a prequel. I'd rather much see Kill Bill Volume 0 over Volume 3.
Well, Pam, which way you going? Left or right?
Right.
That's too bad.
Why?
Well, because it was a 50-50 shot on whether you'd be going left or right. You see, we're both going left. You could have just as easily been going left, too, and if that was the case, it would have been a while before you started getting scared. But since you're going the other way, I'm afraid you're gonna have to start getting scared immediately.
Kill Bill was a big hit for Tarantino, and the film that revitalized interest in his career. And after that, him and his filmmaking BFF, Robert Rodriguez, got together and said, hey, you know what we should do? We should do a double feature. We should call it Grindhouse. There was a lot of excitement going into this movie. Rather infamously, it was not financially well received. And maybe it's because it was long. Altogether, this was a 4-hour thing, but I don't see that as one long movie. It was a double feature. You didn't get to see Grindhouse in the theater.
No, I didn't.
So you missed out on the fake trailers and the intermissions and that.
Yeah.
That is how the movie is most successful, as a film-going experience. You get the fake trailers very well in that regard.
But I have seen both of the movies, and Death Proof, in my opinion, is the strongest out of the two.
It is. Death Proof is widely regarded as Tarantino's worst film. The point where the director thinks that. Tarantino has said, I think Death Proof is the weakest of my movies. From my understanding, you like this film a lot.
And I don't know that I like it a lot. I enjoy it immensely, yes.
Problem with Death Proof, it is designed to defy expectations and test patience. First off, I was a little disappointed because Tarantino said this was going to be his horror movie. That's not a horror movie. Not at all. It's a horror movie. There's some minor horror atmosphere in the early half, but it's not a horror movie at all. What the movie's actually about is girl talk. There's a lot of girl talk in this movie. The basic structure of the screenplay, where it's 2 films in one. The story starts over halfway through. I feel like that's problematic. I really don't like this first batch of girls.
No.
They're really annoying. They're always bitching.
Now, the second half with Rosario Dawson and Zoe Bell.
That first half of the movie takes place almost entirely in a bar. And this is when the self-indulgent comment really makes sense to me. Ooh, boy, is this sequence self-indulgent. The movie opens with a shot of a girl's feet. The whole movie is all about legs, feet, and ass. We get it, Tarantino. You like those sort of things.
Legs, gams, and hams.
And feet. I really get the impression that he's really into feet. None of the characters are likable. Jordan Ladd, good actress, completely wasted in this. Fucking Eli Roth is in it. Stuntman Mike is the most likable character in Death Proof, especially in that first half. And you have to wonder, is that sloppy writing, or was Tarantino doing something? Is he commenting on the slasher movie structure by intentionally making the victims unlikable and making the killer the most interesting character in the film?
I think it was on purpose.
Probably, especially because there's that scene where Stuntman Mike looks at the camera and he doesn't wink at the camera, but he all but winks at the camera. So maybe it is intentional. And that crash is awesome.
That first crash? He did that with all practical effects.
That was one of the whole points of the movie. Do you know the name of the band? That ridiculous band that plays during the crash scene?
No.
Davey, D, Dozy, Beaky, Mick, and Titch. And I only know this because I wrote it down. But the crash is great. The violence escalates. They show the crash from 4 different times, and the violence escalates each time. The Jungle Julia's leg gets torn off and shoots out the window.
Yeah.
Butterfly gets her face grounded off the wheel. I mean,
which is cool.
That's cool. And then the car does the flip. It's incredible. And then the movie starts over again. Oh boy, more girl talk. That's what this film needed. Yeah, the second batch of characters is much more likable.
I don't think he did that on purpose.
Zoe Bell and Rosario Dawson, Mary Elizabeth Winstead in a cheerleader outfit. The 4 of them have a really great back and forth. Even then, are the scenes of them sitting around a table and talking about vanishing points still tedious? Yeah. But that last third, the car chase, now that's awesome.
At the end, when they are kicking his ass, they do like ping pong thing with him. One girl punches him into the next girl, and she punches him into the next girl.
The car chase is really, really good. It makes up for a lot of the film's flaws. They're in the Charger, and it comes off the mound behind Stuntman Mike and flips his car. That's satisfying. The things I love about the movie is that the girls and Stuntman Mike are having this big chase sequence, and there's a lot of collateral damage. A guy gets thrown off his motorcycle, and at one point they're going down the highway, and they're driving against the grain of traffic, and you see in the background there's like a pile of 4 or 5 cars crashing to each other. You mentioned the ending. Were they overreacting? Did Stuntman Mike need to die? The audience knows he's a bad dude. We're aware of the fact that he's a serial killer. But they don't know that. They just think he's some crazy dude who tried to drive him off the road. They kill him. It has to be intentional. He has to be playing with the audience's expectations, but it doesn't work. When Rosario Dawson buries her heel in Kirk Russell's face, they might have overreacted a little. In my opinion, Death Proof is definitely self-indulgent. It's definitely problematic. Is it still an entertaining film? Yeah. It's still fun. You're nodding your head.
Yes, I agree, Zach. It is an entertaining film.
But it definitely is problematic. Another question, before we move on. Jasper, the guy who loans them the car, did he rape Lee, the cheerleader?
No.
That kind of looks like where it's going.
Yeah, but then when she gets back in the car, she doesn't mention anything.
We don't see them go back and pick up Lee.
Oh, I thought we did.
The movie ends with Stuntman Mike dead on the asphalt and them jumping up and cheering. Girl power, you know.
But I got a word of warning for all you would-be warriors. When you join my command, you take on debit. A debit you owe me. Personally. Each and every man under my command owes me 100 Nazi scalps. And I want my scalps. And all y'all will get me 100 Nazi scalps, taken from the heads of 100 dead Nazis. Or you will die trying. 9!
The next film, 2009's Inglourious Basterds. Now, what are your thoughts on this film? Tarantino's war epic.
Now, this is the one that I feel is probably my least favorite.
Individual segments in it are incredible.
The film as a whole.
It's a little awkward in spots. I think this one's a lot better than Death Proof. I would put that at the bottom. It's an interesting thing about the film. This is a movie Tarantino talked about for years. He talked about writing this after Pulp Fiction. At one point, you heard things like Arnold Schwarzenegger's going to be in the movie, and Adam Sandler's going to be in the movie. All these actors that were attached at one point. The final product, get the feeling that this was a much longer story that he cut down. It feels like there's a lot missing in Inglourious Basterds. When I first saw the film, that was disappointing. But in retrospect, I actually feel like it's one of his most disciplined screenplays, because you could tell he cut out so much more. During the long pre-production of this film, he thought about turning it into a 12-hour miniseries. That maybe would have been better. Would have had opportunity for more development for these characters and in this world. The Inglourious Basterds are not actually the main characters in this film.
No, they're not.
No, they're not. In fact, their role is kind of small. They're in there, but you really only get to know about 4 of them. There's a whole team of characters, a lot of those other characters aren't important. The movie's actually about Shoshana and her
Sorry.
own path of revenge against the Nazis. The two plots, the Bastards' path of terrorism against the Nazi regime and Shoshana's personal plot of revenge, play out almost completely separately. They end up intertwining at the end, but the two characters never meet. Taken as a whole, it is a little awkward. We'll talk about that in a bit, but there are some pretty amazing sequences. The opening scene, Hans Landa goes to the farm and talks to the farmer there. That sequence is incredible. We, the audience, know that the Jews are underneath the floorboard. Even before the camera shows us that, we know. The suspense becomes, does Hans Landa know that? And there's a little humor in that scene where he pulls out the ridiculous Sherlock Holmes pipe. Christoph Waltz is revelatory in this. He's so incredible. I don't think any actor has been better suited to Tarantino's dialogue than Christoph Waltz.
Yes.
Even though he's playing this despicable character, this Nazi exterminator, he's incredibly likable. You have to wonder, why does Landa let Shoshana get away? He has the gun on her, he's gonna shoot her, and then he says, nah, au revoir, Shoshana. Why does he do that? Well, what was his motivation behind that?
Because he's an asshole and he wants her to suffer?
Maybe. I feel like that might be it. Very suspenseful sequence. That's powered by Charles Bernstein's score from a movie called The Entity. That suspense just dissolves so fantastically at the end of that first sequence. The introduction of the Bastards, where you have Brad Pitt's speech to them about
Nazis.
Killing Nazis. Business is a booming. I'm not really a big fan of Brad Pitt. He's good in this movie.
Yeah.
Then it goes into Hitler.
9! Okay, so was the meme after or before?
It's over 9,000 Dragon Ball meme existed before this movie, and then afterwards they combine the two, so you have Hitler saying, it's over 9,000! Hugo Stiglitz gets a big introduction. Samuel L. Jackson narrated introduction. All this stuff is really, really cool. And then, third section of the movie slows way, way down into that big high-energy opening. The long scenes of Shoshana talking to Zola, the German soldier outside of her cinema, and meeting him in the diner. That stuff's good. It's not exciting. Sequence with Michael Fassbender. Hickok is his character. He goes in and he talks to Michael Myers, the comedian, not the serial killer. Winston Churchill's in the background. It's your plot mechanic. They're setting up the rest of the movie, and that's not something Tarantino usually does. His expositionary dialogue is usually not that blatant.
I know.
Though Fassbender's very good, to the point where I didn't even realize it was him until later.
Yeah, I didn't know he was in that movie.
I didn't know Magneto was in this.
He was playing for the wrong team.
Yeah, he's a good guy in this. Have this big introduction of Hugo Stiglitz and Hickok. They all get killed in the next chapter.
No!
I mean, sequence in the basement of the bar. And it is frustrating that we meet these cool people and then they die. And maybe Tarantino's making a point about how anybody can die in warfare. Maybe. The first half of the film is a little frustrating. It's not as good as it should be. But that second half, there's a moment where David Bowie's theme from Cat People plays. All the plot pieces fall into place. The last hour of that movie is incredible. It's as good as anything else the director has done. The last half of that film, where everybody's in the theater, the bastards trying to fit in and speaking Italian. Buongiorno. The confrontation with Shoshana and Zola are in the projection room where she gets shot. That's shocking. The music playing is weirdly cathartic. Did you see this one in the theater?
No.
Okay. When Eli Roth and Omar Doom...
Actually, I think the only Tarantino movie I've seen in the theater is...
Django?
Django.
Oh, we gotta correct that. When they kick open the door and they Swiss cheese hit, did you see that coming?
No.
Because up to that point, we were under the impression that this is a historical film. But then they kill Hitler. Oh, this is not a historical film. This is an alternate history movie. Once again, I'm gonna put on my pretentious film critic hat here.
When did you take it off?
I never take it off. You know what Inglourious Basterds is actually about?
What?
It's a film about film. It is about film's effect on history. All the Nazis are gathered in this theater to watch this propaganda film that ends up completely changing the tide of the war. And that's even rather visualized when you have Shoshana's face, laughing, cackling, mad face projected on the cloud of smoke as the theater goes up in flames. Film becomes a literal weapon in this movie when they burn the theater down with the nitrate film. This is Tarantino literalizing his love of cinema and cinema's importance to the world.
Okay.
It's a good film. Not a big fan of Eli Roth, and Brad Pitt gets a good performance, but his accent's terrible. Nazis. I mean, maybe it's supposed to be terrible.
I think it's supposed to be exaggerated.
Yeah.
Yes. I can hear Tarantino going, I don't like that accent, but go with it.
Make that hillbilly accent as retarded as possible. A bit of a slow start. That second half is incredible, man. From the Bowie montage on, that movie is great.
You just like it because he used Bowie music in it.
Well, when I was in the theater watching the movie, the songs are playing like, hey, that sounds like Cat People. Oh, shit, it's Cat People. A song from the 80s in a movie about World War II.
Okay, I'm confused. Are the bags on or off?
I think we all think the bag was a nice idea.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But not pointing any fingers, they could have been done better. So how about no bags this time? But next time, we do the bags right, and then we go full regalia.
Wait a minute! I didn't say no bags.
But nobody can see.
So?
So it'd be nice to see.
God damn it! This is a raid! I can't see, you can't see. So what? All that matters is can the fucking horse see? That's a raid!
like the way you die, boy.
2012's Django Unchained. Now, this is continuing what he started in Inglourious Basterds. Suddenly, he's making movies about rewriting history. What are your thoughts on Django?
There's a lot of the N-word used.
The
111 times, I think we count?
Something like that, yeah. The N-bomb is dropped pretty gratuitously. Actually, it's not gratuitous. It makes perfect sense considering the film.
Yeah, it makes sense in context.
Django Unchained, when I first saw it, I loved the film. This is probably my third favorite Tarantino movie. After Pulp Fiction and Kill Bill, this is number 3 for me. It's exactly what the director said it was going to be. A movie about racism and slavery. But it's not going to be a serious issues film. It's going to be an exploitation movie. And that's exactly what it is. This movie was very controversial. And I understand why. I don't think he's ever flippant about what happened. But the film does. It drops a blaxploitation movie hero into a Western setting. Tarantino says it's not a Western, it's a Southern.
What the fuck ever?
And all of his films were influenced by spaghetti westerns. Almost all of his movies have spaghetti western music. And this is the first time he made a proper western. And it has a lot of the style of that film. It has morally ambiguous hero, and there's these surreal elements. A brief moment of religious satire, and a little bit of homoeroticism and some torture, and a lone hero riding into town to save the day. All these things are from the spaghetti westerns.
And there's a lot of talk about castration at one point.
That's in there, and Billy Crash, Walter Goggins' character, has a song and a step. All these things are inspired by classic spaghetti westerns, which were like American westerns, but had that weird European sensibility to them.
Yeah, Christoph Waltz was awesome in the movie.
Oh my god, he's incredible in this. He diffuses tense moments just by being smarter than everybody else in the room. He talks his way out of so much bullshit. He kills the sheriff.
Get the sheriff.
Not the marshal.
Not the marshal.
And then after...
I like that whole scene. Then he looks at a guy and he goes, now get the marshal. Alright, so why'd you kill the sheriff? And
I'm assuming you will not shoot me down in the street like a dog. You mean like you
did
the
with
sheriff?
the sheriff?
Yes, exactly like that. And then again, when Django and Schultz kill the Brittle brothers on Big Daddy's plantation, he does the same thing. He talks his way out of a very tense situation. It's amazing. He's so good in this. This is also a pretty violent movie. I don't know if you noticed that.
I had.
Anytime somebody gets shot in this film, they just don't get shot. A huge ribbon of blood explodes out of their body and dances through the air. The end of the second act, the shootout at Candyland, that's almost as good as the House of Blue Leaves. It's up there.
I like it when Samuel Jackson's laying there on the ground. He's
well, that's the very end.
Well, God
give me the strength to kill this nigger.
Pretty sure that if you're praying to God, you shouldn't use the N-word.
The shootout in the atrium of the building, the walls get painted red. The one guy keeps getting shot. Anytime a bullet comes, it's just like a bullet sound effect. It's like the sound of a bomb. Great.
Want me to shake your hand? Sorry, couldn't resist, and then he gets blown away.
Well,
the saddest and coolest death in a movie ever.
When I first saw the film, and halfway through the movie, they kill off their villain, and they kill off their most important supporting character. Well, that was unexpected. Tarantino doing his thing. He's very good at surprising audiences. What do you think of the portrayal of racism and slavery in this movie?
Very well done.
It's very blunt. This movie doesn't pull any punches in regards to the cruelty.
If you're going to do a movie about that type of subject, it should be blunt and it should be in your face.
Exactly, yeah.
You shouldn't pull punches.
I absolutely agree with you. For people who say Tarantino glorifies violence, I just think they need to watch the scene in this movie where the runaway slave gets torn apart by the dogs. That's not glorifying violence at all. And the most horrifying thing about some of the violence that goes on in this movie is it really happened. A lot of people questioned at the time what the role of portraying slavery and racism in this way was. Is he making a point, or is he just saying the bad guys are really, really bad? I don't know. But there is that wonderful scene of the bagheads. I can't see shit! Don't ask nothing from me and mine ever again! What's important is can the fucking horse see? This is serving the same purpose that Inglourious Basterds did. This is what action movies should be about. About exercising our cultural demons in big, bold ways. The only film before this in recent memory that I could remember really doing this, remember in the original Iron Man.
Random.
When Tony Stark flies across the ocean, drops down in the middle of Afghanistan, kills a whole bunch of terrorists. When I first saw that, my immediate thought was, wow, I really wish somebody could do that in real life. A single person could just fly in and diffuse a situation immediately. This film, until a degree, Inglourious Basterds, does the same thing, I think. In Inglourious Basterds, they Swiss cheese Hitler. And in this movie, it's all about killing slavers and racists. It is a cathartic effect.
Well, let's talk about the quote-unquote swagger of the film.
It does have quite a bit of swagger.
Jamie Foxx, at the very end, his cowboy outfit he's got on, he's got the hat cocked to the side.
Yeah, he's anachronistic sunglasses on and the cigarette holder.
Has the horse do a little dance.
Well, apparently, Jamie Foxx is an equestrian in real life, and that was his horse.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the shit you read on IMDb. Going in, I wasn't really sure of Jamie Foxx. He seemed like an odd choice, but he does work.
Yeah.
He's very, very angry.
He does quiet angry very well.
Yeah, he has a simmering rage. Always a great cast. What do you think of Leonardo DiCaprio as Calvin Candy?
I like his performance. I'm not a big DiCaprio fan.
Yeah, I'm not a huge... He's a good actor. I wouldn't call myself a fan. Despicable in this, but he doesn't know that he's a terrible person.
Plays it well.
The scene I think of, he turns the let dogs loose on D'Artagnan. This was real life. This is a human being who saw another human being as an object. If Leo had been nominated for an Oscar, his Oscar clip would have been the scene on the table where he's yelling about the skull. I don't know if you noticed, but in that scene he cuts his hand and he's bleeding. That was really his blood. Leo was so into the moment as an actor, and he didn't realize he'd cut his hand until the scene was over. But you know who the most, I don't know if entertaining is the right word, the most memorable characters in this film is Samuel Jackson. What do you think of his performance?
I love it.
It just really shows Sammy's depth as an actor. He's this subservient, mush-mouth house slave. He's doing a character, but then there's the scene where he calls Calvin into the lounge and he has a glass of bourbon in his hand. Suddenly they're equals. Oh, this is an act. Intentionally manipulating people. Thank you, Stephen. You're welcome, Calvin. That veneer shift off when Django is hung up, making big rocks into little rocks, and you're going to keep going until your back gives out. And they're going to hit you in the head with a hammer and drop you down the nigga hole. And that will be the story of you, Django, which is, of course, a Kill Bill reference. That's a great scene. Glad Christoph Waltz won the Oscar for this. It was Sammy's award. He should have won for this one. It's a villain you really love to hate.
And this was such a risque film for the Oscars.
It ended up winning 2 awards, which shocked me. I thought it was too edgy for him. Edgy in the way that the Academy isn't comfortable for him. Reasonably controversial film. If this movie makes you uncomfortable, it should. That's what it's supposed to. But overall, I really, really loved it. Because it's a Tarantino movie, obviously you have small roles. You have Tom Savini in a bit role, you have Michael Parks, Zoe Bell, Robert Carradine, and then, of course, the original Django himself, Franco Nero, has a wonderful cameo where he goes up to Jamie Foxx and he says, "What's your name, boy?" "My name's Django." "Spell it for me." D-G-A-N-G-O. The D is silent. And Franco Nero, the original Django, says, "I know." And then walks off wearing the exact same outfit he wore in the original Django. I see what you did there. I wanted to cheer a little bit when I saw that, and I would have if I hadn't been in a theater full of black people.
And I'm shutting your butt down.
That was off. I'd be whipping your ass up and down this street.
Yeah.
When I started rewatching his films for this podcast, there was no new Tarantino movie on the horizon. There were some things he had talked about. He said he was going to do a movie about a group of all-black soldiers in World War II going apeshit. His words. That would have been called Killer Crow. That sounds like one of those projects he talks about and never makes. Like the Vega Brothers movie, or Kill Bill Volume 3, or that Mandarin Kung Fu movie he was going to do. But then, very quickly, the news came up of this new screenplay called The Hateful Eight. And Bruce Dern was going to be in it, and it was going to be a Western, going to be shot in Super Scope, all these things. And then, just as quickly as that was announced, the project fell apart. Somebody leaked the screenplay, and Tarantino got pissed and said, "I'm not making that movie right now, I'm making something else." I had an opportunity to read the screenplay for The Hateful Eight. I would have liked to have seen the film. It's set post-Civil War in Wyoming. And to call it a Western is a little misleading because it takes place in the winter, and the majority of the film is in one location.
It's a northern.
Yeah, it's a northern. Bounty hunter is in a stagecoach with his bounty, a handcuff to his hand, this woman. And in the middle of the road is a black man in a Union Civil War uniform, sitting on 3 dead bodies, and he too is a bounty hunter. And everybody's headed toward Red Rock, Wyoming, to claim their bounty. And because of the storm, they are delayed, and they stop at a place called Minnie's Haberdashery, which is not actually haberdashery. There they meet a strange group of people, an Englishman who claims to be the new hangman for Red Rock, a Frenchman named Bob, a cowboy, and then a former Confederate general. The rest of the movie plays out in that setting. It is very similar to Reservoir Dogs, and the movie is about the tension and the paranoia slowly rising in this group until eventually shots are fired. You mentioned earlier how you think he writes roles for particular actors. Yeah, he does. The Black Major is very, very clearly Samuel L. Jackson. You read the dialogue and you can hear him saying the dialogue.
If it wasn't for Quentin Tarantino, Samuel L. Jackson would have only done half the movies he's done.
I think he probably would have become a name actor eventually, because he was in some stuff before that, but obviously he wouldn't have been a star without Pulp Fiction. The lead character is obviously meant for Jackson. The old Confederate generals, obviously, we know a part was written for Bruce Dern, and that's the one. There's this Englishman who is very verbose and has long blocks of dialogue where he diffuses the situation by talking. I wonder who that could be.
But Christoph Waltz should have been the Frenchman.
Conversely, Bob, the Frenchman, has very little dialogue. At one point, the script stops trying to hide the fact that these parts are written for people in line. In post-Civil War Wyoming, during a flashback, suddenly a young New Zealand woman shows up.
Zoe Bell.
Yeah, obviously Zoe Bell. I mean, and is the script good? Yeah, it's pretty good. It's a first draft. It says first draft on the first page. It's a little rough in spots. And obviously, if this had been the shooting draft, it would have been a more solid script. Dialogue is still very sharp. The story construction is still very sharp. The characters are still very strong. Would I see this movie? I would totally see this movie.
Of course we'd see this movie. It's a Tarantino movie.
Obviously. I do hope he makes it eventually. He said he might make it someday, just not now. Right now, the rumor is that his next movie might be a prison film, inspired by the Robert Blake case, which would be interesting. He's never really done a based on a true story film before. The prison movie is similarly one of those genres that have a set of rules that Tarantino likes to play with. But yeah, what I want to see him, I want to see him make a real horror movie. Death Proof was supposed to be one, but it wasn't really. Clearly, he has a love of the genre. I remember reading an interview with him in Fangoria magazine, the time the first Kill Bill came out, and he said that he has half of a script for a giallo. I want to see that movie! I want to see a Tarantino giallo!
It would have to be a psychological horror movie. It would have to...
Well, obviously.
The killer would have to, like, deliver these big, long, epic monologues before they kill somebody.
Tarantino talks a lot about things he wants to do. He said at one point he wanted to do Casino Royale. He wanted to do a James Bond movie. He wanted to do a Jason Voorhees movie. He wanted to do a Godzilla movie. Do it! If you can't make it Godzilla, make it some other kaiju. I'm intrigued to see him working in those sort of genres. You know, maybe he will eventually.
I feel like he would be a good director for a superhero movie, but what superhero, I'm not sure.
He'd have to make up his own. I don't know about Tarantino doing a superhero. That's not really his style. It would be a very different superhero movie. There's a DC character called Vigilante, ground level, shoot-'em-up hero. That's something Tarantino could do. He would do like a 70s Charles Bronson movie, which would be awesome.
He could do Red Hood.
He never would. He'd make up his own character if he wanted to do something like that. You're always thinking about superheroes, aren't you, man? And that's our thoughts on that one. Before we leave you this evening, the Bangers and Mash Army, I actually have a question for you. The next episode we will be doing will be another commentary episode, because it's time. And I want to know, what film do you want to see us commenting on? I'm leaving the decision up to the fans. And if they don't say anything, we'll figure something out, because they probably won't. In the off chance that one of our listeners actually cares enough to send us a suggestion, please do. Our email is bangersandmash88@yahoo.com. That's the word bangers, that's the letter N, that's the word mash, that's the number 88 at yahoo.com. We have a Facebook, www.facebook.com/TheBangersAndMashShow. Look us up. Yes, please send in your ideas for a commentary. I want to hear them. As always, I am your host, Mr. Bangers, a.k.a. Zach.
I'm Mr. Mash, a.k.a. JD.
You know, at the end of Pulp Fiction, where they say, we should probably go now. Yeah, we should. And they put their guns in their shorts, waistbands, and walk off. Yeah, let's do that right now.
Okay, yes.
Okay, Ted, pay attention here. I'm going to make two piles here on the bar. One pile, which is yours, and another pile, which could be yours. And what you have to realize is we're going to do this thing one way or the other. Whether it's you who holds the axe, or a Mexican maid, or some bum we yank off the street.
You can buy a whole lot of soup with that pile.
Shh, I'm the closer here, all right? Now, I'm a little I've lost count. How much is on the bar here?
600.
Okay. Ted, do you know how long it takes the average American to count to 600?
No, sir.
About 1 minute less than it takes to count to 700. Now, Ted, a person's life is filled with a zillion little experiences, some which are insignificant, have no meaning, and, you forget them. Others which you remember for the rest of your natural life. Now, since what we're proposing here is so unusual, so outside the norm, that this is a good bet that this is going to be one of those incidences that sticks. So, since you're going to be stuck remembering this for the rest of your life, you have to decide what that memory will be. So, Ted, are you going to remember for the next 40 years, give or take a decade, that you refused $1,000 for 1 second's worth of work? Or that you made $1,000 for 1 second's worth of work?
Time.
So, Ted, what's it going to be? Okay.
Yes! Always, baby!